Hello and Grüß Gott. This is part 5 of our Stillen Supercharger install on my 2011 Nissan Xterra with a 4-liter engine. At this point, we're almost ready to start with the supercharger mechanical part, but before we get to that, the instructions tell us to replace these coolant lines going across here. So we're going to pull this coolant line off that's here and route another one over the top, and then we're going to cut another metal line and deburr it. I have a deburring tool, and then we will install another coolant line. And so we're going to get that part done, and then we're going to come back and show you what we did and talk a little bit about it. At this point, what we've done is we've gone ahead and routed and replaced this one line with the Adel clamps and tightened them down. I used a little bit of medium strength Loctite, and then I used some inspector's lacquer to mark that I had tightened them up. So that line is complete, and now it's time to put the 1/2-inch line. And here's the old line that came out, and it goes from this tube that comes out here, this metal tube, all the way down through the side and down to the sandwich on the oil filter. And one thing I wanted to mention is to get these hoses loose, you need a tool like this. Makes it a lot easier, so you can get in and get the tool loose. So we got the metal line loose, and then it tells you to cut it, so we cut it. And then I used my ridge reamer to clean the inside a little bit. And then I used my deburring tool to clean the inside. And then I used some sandpaper to go around the outside. So now it's nice and smooth and ready to accept a hose. So the kit comes with 2 red Adel clamps for this part. And you'll use the old hardware, which I have right here. And I'll Loctite those on. So we're going to get this thing all installed, and then I'll come back and we'll take a look at it. I've completed the second hose installation now. We did a couple of small modifications from the instructions. One is I went down to the hardware store and got a hose clamp to add to this regular clamp because this could easily slide off under pressure. So I just snugged it down slightly. Also, we used some of the sheathing to put underneath these Adel clamps to prevent any chafing or damage to these lines. So we did that, and I also had to go to the hardware store and buy slightly longer bolts, just a little bit longer, to compensate for the thickness of the Adel clamps. So I did that and installed them, and we routed it down to the oil filter sandwich, and it's connected there. And over here we wire tied it, and we put some more of this braided material on the side here so it wouldn't abrade, and it came out really, really nice. Looks first class. So now we're ready to install the lower portion of the supercharger. And just a word of warning, if you drop anything in your engine, that's going to be a big problem. So I'm going to take the lower piece and I'm going to tape it before I put it in so that where the screws go, we won't be able to drop anything through. So we're going to get that part ready, and we'll come back and install it, and then I'll discuss how things went. We have this portion of the lower part ready. And so what we did was we took these gaskets from the old plenum and put them in the new one. And I used Krytox grease to grease them real well. And I put them in, and then I gently wiped them down a little bit so they're not all sticky or anything. And then I put tape on the other side, as you'll see, so that if we drop a screw while we're installing it, it won't go in. It's going to take 2 of us to put this in, and you have to make sure you don't pinch any wires. And the other thing to note is these screws get torqued down with inch pounds, not foot pounds. So it's a very light force. So we're going to get that done, and then we'll come right back and see how that thing went. This is now installed. We torqued the bolts in a star pattern or crisscross pattern to 12.5 Newton meters. We use mostly Newton meters. They gave the spec in inch pounds. That's fine. We just converted it. Make sure this hose is reattached. It's going to go underneath. Then we temporarily push the wiring all back, and you have to make sure no wiring's pinched. So we made sure everything's free over here, and the hardest one is the rear injector wire. They didn't leave any real path for it, so I had to run it behind and up and around, so it should be okay. And now we're ready to go grab the main body of the unit and install it. So we also cleaned this out, vacuumed it out, and we have some tape here temporarily. We're going to pull it out here in just a minute, and then we're going to install the body. So at this point we have the main unit installed. We tightened everything down. We really couldn't get in with torque wrenches, even though I have all sorts of special tools, crow's foot wrenches, etc., etc. So I just hand tightened everything really good and snug. Just a little, you know, not very tight. I'm just going to say it that way. Just good and snug. You can kind of get a feel for it when you've been working on something, so you know when not to strip it. So that's done, and that's going to conclude this part of the series, and we'll move to the next part. And on that next part, we'll cover installing the 7th injector fuel line, the throttle body, and a couple of other things. So until then, thanks for watching. Tschüss.